The shrill sound of the alarm echoed through the room, yanking Claire Thompson from her deep sleep. She reached out, blindly groping until she found her phone on the bedside table. 6:30 a.m. With a sigh, she got up, feeling the familiar weight of routine on her shoulders. Another day, another battle, she muttered to herself as she headed to the bathroom. Claire, a 32-year-old biology teacher, had always been a woman of habit. Her life was a well-adjusted clock, predictable, constant, safe. But on that Wednesday morning, something was about to change. Something that would shake the foundations of everything she thought she knew about herself and her family. As she got ready, Claire glanced at the calendar hanging on the wall. A red circle marked the date: blood donation. She smiled, feeling a twinge of pride. It was her first time donating, a small act of kindness she had finally managed to fit into her busy schedule. It'll be quick, she thought. I'll be in and out before lunch. Little did she know that this simple decision would trigger a series of events that would change her life forever. Claire arrived at the donation center at 11 a.m. sharp. The place was surprisingly quiet, with only a few people waiting their turn. She filled out the form carefully, answering questions about her medical history with the precision of a science teacher. "Miss Thompson," called a middle-aged nurse with a welcoming smile. "Please follow me." Claire followed the nurse to a private room where a gray-haired doctor was waiting. The nameplate on her coat read, "Dr. Sarah Bennett, hematologist." "Good morning, Claire," Dr. Bennett greeted. "First time donating blood?" Claire nodded, feeling a slight anxiety. "Yes, I've always wanted to do this, but never found the right moment." The doctor smiled. "Well, today's the day. Let's start with a quick test to determine your blood type." Claire extended her arm, watching as Dr. Bennett collected a small blood sample. The procedure was quick and painless, but something in the doctor's expression as she examined the results made Claire feel uneasy. "Is there a problem?" she asked, feeling a knot forming in her stomach. Dr. Bennett frowned, looking from Claire to the test result and back to Claire. "Miss Thompson, are you sure about your parents' blood types?" Claire blinked, confused. "Yes, of course. My father is A positive and my mother is O negative. Why?" The doctor hesitated for a moment, as if carefully choosing her words. "Claire, according to this test, your blood type is AB negative." "And?" Claire asked, not understanding the reason for the concern. "The problem is that, well, it's genetically impossible for you to have that blood type, considering your parents' types." Claire's world seemed to freeze at that moment. Dr. Bennett's words echoed in her mind, but they didn't make sense. What did she mean? Impossible. "There must be some mistake," Claire said, her voice trembling slightly. "Maybe the test is wrong?" Dr. Bennett shook her head. "We can redo the test, but it's highly unlikely to be wrong. Claire, have you ever considered the possibility of—" "No," Claire interrupted, abruptly standing up. "Don't say that. There must be another explanation." But as she uttered those words, a feeling of doubt began to spread through her chest. Memories of her childhood passed through her mind like a fast-forwarded movie. The strange looks she sometimes received from distant relatives, the whispered conversations that ceased when she entered the room, her parents' reluctance to talk about her pregnancy or show photos of when she was a baby. I need to go," Claire muttered, grabbing her purse with shaky hands. "Claire, wait!" Dr. Bennett called out, but Claire was already out the door, her heart pounding frantically against her ribs. She walked the streets aimlessly, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. People passed by her, oblivious to the fact that Claire's world was crumbling. Her phone rang, making her jump. It was Daniel, her boyfriend. "Hey, love," his voice sounded concerned. "Everything okay? You didn't show up for lunch." Claire swallowed hard, realizing she had completely lost track of time. "Daniel, something happened. Can you meet me at the park near home? Now?" "Of course, I'm on my way. What happened? I'll tell you when you get here. Please come quickly." Claire hung up and headed to the park, her mind a jumble of unanswered questions. When Daniel arrived 15 minutes later, he found her sitting on a bench, staring blankly into space. "Claire," he called softly, sitting down beside her. "What happened?" She looked at him, her eyes watery. "Daniel, I think my entire life might be a lie." And then, with a choked voice, Claire began to tell the story that would change everything. Meanwhile, across town, in a seemingly ordinary suburban house, Emily Thompson hung up the phone with trembling hands. Her face was pale, and fear shone in her eyes. "Thomas," she called, her voice barely above a whisper. "She knows." Thomas Thompson emerged from the study, his usually calm countenance now marked by concern. "What do you mean she knows?" "Claire," Emily replied, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "She found out. The hospital called. She took a blood test and—" Thomas closed his eyes, feeling the weight of decades of secrets crashing down on his shoulders. "My God," he muttered. "What are we going to do now?" The silence that followed was deafening, filled only by the relentless ticking of the clock on the wall, marking the seconds of a truth about to come to light. In the Thompsons' living room, a family photo smiled from the fireplace, Claire in the center, embraced by her parents. The image of happiness and normalcy now seemed a cruel irony, a facade about to crumble. Meanwhile, in a dark office across town, a man was watching a computer screen, his eyes fixed on a file labeled Operation Nursery. He picked up the phone, dialing a number he knew by heart. "Doctor," he said gravely, "we have a problem. The Thompson girl is asking questions." On the other end of the line, a voice coldly replied, "Then it's time to silence her, permanently." The man hung up, a dark smile forming on his lips. The hunt was about to begin. Back at the park, Claire was finishing telling Daniel what had happened at the donation center. Her boyfriend listened attentively, his training as a private detective kicking in as he processed the information. "Claire," he finally said, holding her hands in his, "I know this must be a huge shock for you, but we need to think clearly. There are possible explanations for this that don't involve, well, you know." Claire shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "What explanations, Daniel? You heard what I said. It's genetically impossible." Daniel took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "Look, I understand your anguish, but before we jump to conclusions, we need to investigate. There could be an error in the test, or maybe there's something in your family's medical history that you don't know about." Claire stared at him, a spark of hope shining in her eyes. You would help me uncover the truth?" Daniel nodded, determined. "Of course I will. We'll get to the bottom of this together. But Claire, you need to be prepared. Whatever truth we find—" "I know," she interrupted, her voice gaining strength. "But I need to know, Daniel. I can't live with this doubt." At that moment, as the sun began to set on the horizon, casting long shadows across the park, Claire and Daniel had no idea of the forces they had set in motion. They didn't know about the eyes watching them from afar, nor the dark secrets they were about to unearth. Claire's search for the truth was just beginning, and the path ahead was fraught with dangers she could scarcely imagine. But one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. As night fell over the city, different pieces of the chessboard began to move. In a small apartment in the suburbs, Dr. James Thompson, Thomas's twin brother and Claire's uncle, received an enigmatic message on his cell phone. "The truth is coming to light. Get ready." James looked at the photo on his bedside table, a young Claire smiling innocently at the camera. His eyes filled with tears as he muttered to himself, "Forgive me, my dear. Forgive me for not being strong enough to protect you." Meanwhile, at the Thompsons' house, Emily paced back and forth in the living room, nervously biting her nails. Thomas sat in his favorite armchair, an untouched glass of whiskey in his hand. "What if she comes here?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. "What will we tell her?" Thomas took a long sip of his drink before answering. "The truth, Emily. After all these years, maybe it's time for the truth." Emily stopped, turning to face him with wide eyes. "The truth? Have you gone mad? That would destroy everything. And lying more won't destroy it?" Thomas retorted, his voice tired. "Look at us, Emily. Look at what these secrets have done to us." The sound of the doorbell cut through the tension like a knife. Emily froze, her face losing all color. Thomas slowly got up, placing the glass on the table. "The time has come," he said, heading for the door. When he opened it, Claire was there, her eyes red from crying, but her posture determined. Daniel was by her side, a silent and protective presence. "Dad," Claire said, her voice barely containing the emotion, "we need to talk." Thomas nodded gravely, stepping aside to let them in. "Yes, my dear, I think it's time we had a long conversation." As the door closed behind them, No one noticed the dark car parked across the street, nor the man inside it who watched the scene with calculating interest. The night would be long, and the secrets buried for so long were about to come to light, bringing with them consequences that no one could predict. As the door closed behind them, the tension in the Thompson household was palpable. Claire stood in the living room, her eyes darting between her parents, searching for any sign of the truth she desperately sought. Daniel remained close, a silent pillar of support. Thomas cleared his throat, gesturing towards the sofa. "Please, sit down. This isn't going to be easy." Claire's voice trembled as she spoke. "Just tell me the truth, Dad. Am I adopted?" Emily let out a choked sob, covering her mouth with her hand. Thomas closed his eyes, his shoulders sagging under the weight of decades of secrets. "Yes," he said softly, the word hanging in the air like a death sentence. "But Claire, you have to understand, it's complicated." "Complicated?" Claire exploded, jumping to her feet. "You've been lying to me my entire life, and all you can say is it's complicated?" Daniel placed a calming hand on her shoulder, but Claire shrugged it off, her eyes blazing with a mix of anger and pain. Thomas held up his hands in a placating gesture. "Please, let me explain. It's not what you think. We were trying to protect you." "Protect me from what?" Claire demanded, her voice rising. Before Thomas could answer, a sharp knock at the door made everyone freeze. Emily's face drained of color, and Thomas exchanged a worried glance with her before moving to answer it. As he opened the door, a tall man with graying hair pushed his way inside. Claire's jaw dropped in shock. It was like looking at a younger version of her father. "Uncle James?" she gasped. "What are you doing here?" James Thompson's eyes locked onto Claire, a mix of emotions playing across his face. "I'm sorry, Claire. I should have come forward years ago." Thomas stepped between them, his voice low and dangerous. "James, don't. You have no right." "No right?" James snapped. "She deserves to know the truth, Thomas. All of it." Claire's head was spinning. "What truth? Will someone please tell me what's going on?" James took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving Claire's. "I'm not just your uncle, Claire. I'm your biological father." The room fell silent, the revelation hanging in the air like a thunderclap. Claire stumbled backward, her legs giving way as she collapsed onto the sofa. Daniel was immediately by her side, his arm around her shoulders. "What? How?" Claire struggled to form coherent thoughts. "But you're twins. How is this possible?" James ran a hand through his hair, his voice heavy with regret. "It was 33 years ago. I was young, stupid, and in love with a woman I couldn't have. Your mother, Claire." All eyes turned to Emily, who was now sobbing quietly in the corner. Thomas stood rigid, his fists clenched at his sides. "Emily and we had an affair," James continued. "When she got pregnant, we knew we couldn't keep the baby. Thomas had always wanted a child, but Emily couldn't conceive, so we made a deal." Claire's mind was reeling. "A deal? What kind of deal?" Thomas finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "I agreed to raise you as my own, Claire, to give you the life you deserved, the family you needed. In exchange, James would disappear from our lives." "But why?" Claire cried, tears streaming down her face. "Why all the secrecy? Why not just tell me the truth?" James and Thomas exchanged a loaded glance, and Claire felt a chill run down her spine. There was more to this story, something darker lurking beneath the surface. "Because," James said softly, "the circumstances of your birth weren't legal." Daniel leaned forward, his detective instincts kicking in. "What do you mean? Not legal?" Thomas shot James a warning look, but the younger twin pressed on. "Claire, the hospital where you were born, it wasn't just a hospital. It was the center of an illegal adoption ring. Babies were being bought and sold to wealthy couples who couldn't have children of their own." Claire felt like she was going to be sick. "Are you saying I was sold?" "No," Emily cried out, finally finding her voice. "No, Claire, you weren't sold. You were rescued." All eyes turned to Emily as she continued, her voice shaky but determined. "I worked as a nurse at that hospital. When I discovered I was pregnant, I also uncovered the truth about what was happening there. Babies were being taken from vulnerable mothers, birth records falsified. I couldn't let that happen to you, Claire." Thomas picked up the story, his voice grave. "When Emily told me what was happening, we knew we had to act. We couldn't go to the authorities. The people behind this operation were too powerful, too connected, so we came up with a plan. What kind of plan? Daniel asked, his arm tightening protectively around Claire. James answered, his eyes clouded with old pain. We faked Emily's pregnancy. When the time came, I helped her deliver Claire at home. We created a false paper trail, making it look like Claire was born to Emily and Thomas. It was the only way to keep her safe, to keep her out of the system. Claire's head was spinning. But why didn't you tell me? All these years. Thomas knelt in front of Claire, taking her hands in his. Because the danger never went away, sweetheart. The people behind that operation, they're still out there. We were afraid that if the truth came out, if anyone started asking questions, they'd come for me, Claire finished, a chill running down her spine. Suddenly, the sound of breaking glass shattered the tense atmosphere. A small, cylindrical object crashed through the window, rolling across the floor. Get down! Daniel yelled, recognizing the danger instantly. He threw himself over Claire, just as the smoke grenade exploded, filling the room with thick, acrid smoke. Chaos erupted. Claire could hear shouting, the sound of furniture being overturned. Someone grabbed her arm, pulling her roughly. She tried to scream, but the smoke choked her, burning her eyes and throat. Through the haze, she saw shadowy figures moving, heard the dull thud of fists connecting with flesh. A gunshot rang out, followed by a cry of pain. Claire! She heard Daniel's voice, desperate and muffled. Claire, where are you? She tried to answer, but strong arms were dragging her towards the door. As she was pulled out into the cool night air, she caught a glimpse of a van with darkened windows waiting at the curb. No, she managed to choke out, struggling against her captors. Let me go. A cloth was pressed against her face, reeking of chemicals. As consciousness began to slip away, Claire's last thought was of the irony, how her search for the truth had led her straight into the danger her parents had spent a lifetime trying to protect her from. The van doors slammed shut, and it sped off into the night, leaving behind a house filled with smoke, shattered glass, and the echoes of a family torn apart by long-buried secrets. Miles away, in a dimly lit office, a phone rang. A man with cold, calculating eyes answered it. Is it done? He asked, his voice devoid of emotion. Yes, sir, came the reply. We have the girl. What are your orders? The man smiled, a predatory gleam in his eyes. Bring her to the facility. It's time to tie up loose ends. Permanently. As he hung up the phone, he turned to look at a wall covered in photos and documents. At the center was a faded picture of a young Claire Thompson, surrounded by complex diagrams and lists of names. The man picked up a red marker and drew a circle around Claire's face. You should have stayed in the dark, my dear, he murmured. Some truths are better left buried. Back at the Thompson house, as the smoke began to clear, Daniel stumbled out onto the front lawn, coughing and disoriented. Thomas and James were right behind him, supporting a semi-conscious Emily between them. Claire? Daniel called out, his voice hoarse. Claire! But there was no answer. The street was empty, save for a few curious neighbors peering out of their windows. In the distance, sirens wailed, growing closer. Thomas grabbed Daniel's arm, his face ashen. They took her, didn't they? They found out, and they took her. Daniel nodded grimly, his mind already racing. We need to move fast. I have contacts in law enforcement, people who owe me favors. We can. No, James interrupted, his voice firm. No police. The people behind this, they have eyes and ears everywhere. We go to the authorities, and Claire is as good as dead. Then what do we do? Emily sobbed, clutching Thomas for support. James's eyes hardened with determination. We do what we should have done 33 years ago. We take the fight to them. Daniel looked at the three of them, a broken family united by a terrible secret and an even more terrible mission. I'm in, he said. Whatever it takes, we're getting Claire back. As the group hurried back into the house to plan their next move, none of them noticed the sleek black car parked across the street, its tinted windows hiding the observer within. The driver picked up a secure phone, dialing a number from memory. Sir, we have a problem, he reported. The Thompsons are mobilizing. What are your orders? There was a pause on the other end of the line before a cold voice responded. Initiate Protocol Omega. No witnesses, no loose ends. This ends tonight. The pieces were set, the players in motion. As dawn broke over the city, a race against time began, with Claire's life hanging in the balance and decades of dark secrets threatening to explode into the light of day. Little did any of them know, the truth they sought was far more terrifying than they could have ever imagined, and the cost of uncovering it might be higher than any of them were prepared to pay. The abandoned warehouse loomed before them, a hulking silhouette against the pre-dawn sky. Daniel crouched behind a rusted shipping container, his heart pounding in his ears. To his left, James and Thomas huddled together, their faces grim with determination. Emily waited in the getaway car, ready for a quick escape. "Are you sure this is the place?" Thomas whispered, his voice trembling slightly. Daniel nodded, checking his weapon one last time. "My contact was clear. If Claire's anywhere, she's in there." James's eyes narrowed as he scanned the building. "I see 2 guards at the main entrance, probably more inside." "Remember the plan," Daniel said, his voice low and intense. "We go in fast and quiet. Find Claire and get out. No heroes." As they prepared to move, a sudden crackle of static made them freeze. A voice, distorted but unmistakable, came through the small radio they'd brought. "I know you're out there," the voice said, sending chills down their spines. "Did you really think you could outsmart me? Come inside. Let's end this game." Daniel and the Thompsons exchanged horrified glances. They'd been made. "It's a trap," Thomas hissed. "We don't have a choice," James replied, his jaw set. "They have Claire." With a collective deep breath, they emerged from their hiding spot and approached the warehouse. The guards, surprisingly, made no move to stop them as they entered the dimly lit interior. Inside, they found themselves in a vast open space filled with rows of medical equipment and what looked disturbingly like incubators. At the far end, bathed in harsh fluorescent light, stood a man in a white lab coat. Next to him, bound to a chair and looking terrified but alive, was Claire. "Claire!" Daniel shouted, starting forward, but James held him back. The man in the lab coat smiled, a cold, reptilian expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Welcome, gentlemen. I've been expecting you." "Who are you?" Thomas demanded, his voice shaking with rage and fear. The man's smile widened. "Oh, come now, Thomas. Surely you remember your old colleague, Dr. Elliot Saunders, at your service." Recognition dawned on Thomas's face, followed quickly by horror. "Elliot? But you disappeared years ago. We thought you were dead." "Dead? No, my old friend. Merely evolving." Saunders gestured grandly at the equipment around them. "Behold, the culmination of decades of work, the future of human genetics, right here in this room." "You're insane," James spat. "Let Claire go. Now." Saunders laughed, the sound echoing eerily through the warehouse. "Oh, James, always so protective of your little secret. Did you really think I didn't know? That I hadn't been watching all these years?" He moved behind Claire, placing his hands on her shoulders. She flinched at his touch, her eyes wide with fear. "Claire here is special, you see," Saunders continued, his voice taking on a fanatical edge. "The product of a unique genetic combination. The perfect subject for my work." "What work?" Daniel demanded, his hand inching towards his concealed weapon. Saunders' eyes gleamed with manic intensity. "Genetic perfection, of course. Imagine it, a world where we can eliminate disease, enhance intelligence, even extend life itself. All it takes is the right raw material." The implications of his words sank in, leaving them all feeling sick. "You've been experimenting on babies," Thomas gasped, the full horror of what he'd unknowingly been part of finally dawning on him. "Babies, children, adults, all in the name of progress," Saunders confirmed, his tone disturbingly casual. "And now, with Claire, I'm on the verge of a breakthrough that will change everything." "You're a monster," Claire managed to say, her voice hoarse but defiant. Saunders merely smiled, reaching for a nearby syringe filled with an ominous blue liquid. "Monster? No, my dear. I'm the future, and you're going to help usher it in." "Stop!" Daniel shouted, drawing his gun. In an instant, armed guards seemed to materialize from the shadows, their weapons trained on the group. "Ah!" Saunders tutted, wagging his finger. "I wouldn't do that if I were you. One wrong move, and Claire here gets a dose of something far less pleasant than my little cocktail." Time seemed to stand still as they faced this impossible situation. Daniel's mind raced, searching for a way out. James and Thomas stood frozen, the weight of their past decisions crushing down on them. Just when all seemed lost, a deafening explosion rocked the warehouse. The far wall erupted in a shower of concrete and metal, and through the dust and debris strode a figure none of them expected to see. "Step away from my granddaughter, you son of a bitch!" Emily Thompson's voice rang out, strong and clear. In her hands, she wielded what looked like a makeshift explosive device. The momentary distraction was all they needed. Daniel lunged forward, tackling Saunders to the ground. The syringe went flying, shattering against a nearby incubator. James and Thomas rushed to Claire, quickly working to free her from her bonds. Chaos erupted. Guards opened fire, but Emily had come prepared. She tossed another homemade explosive, filling the air with thick smoke. Through the confusion, Daniel managed to subdue Saunders, while James and Thomas got Claire to safety. As they ran for the exit, Claire suddenly stopped, her eyes wide. "Wait! The evidence! We can't let him destroy it!" Daniel hesitated for a split second before nodding. "You're right. Go with your family. I'll take care of it." "Daniel, no!" Claire cried, but James was already pulling her towards the exit. Daniel turned back, diving into the smoke-filled warehouse. He had to find proof, something to bring this whole horrific operation down once and for all. Outside, Claire struggled against her father's grip. "We can't leave him in there." "He'll be fine," Thomas assured her, though his voice lacked conviction. "We need to go. Now." As they piled into the waiting car, with Emily behind the wheel, the night sky lit up with another explosion. The warehouse erupted in flames, the fire quickly consuming the building and all its dark secrets. "Daniel!" Claire screamed, her heart shattering as she watched the inferno grow. For a moment, all hope seemed lost. Then, like a phoenix rising from the ashes, a figure emerged from the flames. Battered, smoke-stained but alive, Daniel staggered towards them, clutching a hard drive and a stack of files. "Let's go," he coughed as he collapsed into the car. "It's over." As they sped away, leaving behind the burning evidence of decades of secrets and lies, Claire looked at the faces around her, her biological father, the man who raised her, the woman who gave birth to her, and the man who risked everything to save her. She realized that family wasn't just about blood or genetics. It was about love, sacrifice, and the choices we make. In the distance, sirens wailed as emergency services responded to the fire. But for Claire and her unconventional family, a new day was dawning. The truth had come at a heavy price, but with it came the chance for healing, forgiveness, and a future free from the shadows of the past. As the sun rose over the city, casting its warm light on their battered but unbroken spirits, Claire knew that their journey was far from over. There would be questions to answer, wounds to heal, and a lifetime of rediscovery ahead. But for the first time in what felt like forever, she was ready to face it all, with the truth as her compass and the love of her family as her strength. The car sped on towards an uncertain but hopeful future, leaving behind the ashes of secrets long buried and the promise of a new beginning. As the dust settled in the days following the warehouse incident, Claire Thompson found herself at the center of a media storm. The story of illegal adoptions, genetic experimentation, and decades-old family secrets captivated the nation. But for Claire and her family, the real work was just beginning. Sitting in the living room of a safe house, surrounded by the people she now knew as her true family, Claire took a deep breath. "So, what happens now?" Daniel, his arm in a sling from injuries sustained in the fire, squeezed her hand reassuringly. "The evidence we recovered is being analyzed. Dr. Saunders and his associates will face justice." James nodded solemnly. "It's not just about them, though. This conspiracy goes deep. There are powerful people involved, people who won't go down without a fight." "But we'll be ready," Thomas added, his voice firm. "No more secrets, no more hiding. We face this together." Emily, who had surprised them all with her bravery at the warehouse, spoke up. "Claire, sweetheart, I know we've put you through so much. If you need time, if you need space from us, we understand." Claire looked around at the faces of her family, biological and chosen. She saw the love, the regret, the hope in their eyes. In that moment, she made a decision that would shape the rest of her life. "No," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "No more running, no more hiding. We're a family, dysfunctional, complicated, and a little bit crazy, but a family nonetheless. Whatever comes next, we face it together." The relief in the room was palpable. Tears were shed, hugs exchanged, and for the first time in years, genuine laughter filled the air. As the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the Thompson family embarked on a journey of healing and rediscovery. They testified against Dr. Saunders and his collaborators, bringing to light a conspiracy that shook the medical and political establishments to their core. Claire, with Daniel by her side, became an advocate for adoptee rights and genetic privacy. Her story inspired others to come forward, uncovering a network of illegal adoptions that spanned decades and continents. James and Thomas, once estranged by secrets and rivalry, forged a new bond as brothers and fathers to Claire. They worked tirelessly to make amends for their past mistakes, using their medical expertise to help other families affected by the scandal. Emily, emboldened by her actions at the warehouse, channeled her energy into supporting other mothers who had been victims of the illegal adoption ring. Her courage and compassion touched countless lives. As for Dr. Saunders, he faced a long list of charges. His trial became a landmark case, sparking debates about medical ethics, genetic research, and the limits of scientific pursuit. 1 year after the night that changed everything, the Thompson family gathered once again. This time, it wasn't in a safe house, but in Claire and Daniel's new home. As they sat around the dinner table, Claire raised her glass. "To family," she said, her eyes shining with emotion. "To truth, to second chances, and to the power of love to overcome even the darkest of secrets." As they clinked glasses, Claire felt a sense of peace wash over her. The road ahead was still uncertain, but she knew that with her family by her side, she could face anything. Later that evening, as the others chatted and laughed in the living room, Claire slipped away to the quiet of her study. She sat at her desk, opened her laptop, and began to type. "My name is Claire Thompson, and this is my story. A story of lies and truth, of science and ethics, of nature versus nurture. But most of all, it's a story about family, the one we're born into, the one that raises us, and the one we choose for ourselves." She paused, her fingers hovering over the keys. Then, with a smile, she continued. "I never expected my life to turn out this way. A simple blood test unleashed a chain of events that shattered everything I thought I knew about myself and my family. But from those broken pieces, we've built something stronger, something real. To those of you out there who might be struggling with your own identity, who might be grappling with secrets or lies, I want you to know, you are not alone. The truth can be painful, but it can also set you free. Embrace it, fight for it, and never forget that family is more than just DNA. It's about love, acceptance, and the choices we make every day." This is not the end of my story. In many ways, it's just the beginning. But whatever comes next, I'm ready for it. Because now I know who I am, where I come from, and most importantly, who stands beside me. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, if it moved you in any way, I ask one thing: share it. There are others out there who need to hear this message of hope and truth. Together, we can bring light to the shadows and help others find their way home. Claire leaned back, reading over what she had written. It felt right. It felt true. With a deep breath, she clicked publish on her blog. As the post went live, Claire felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had taken control of her narrative, turned her pain into purpose, and in doing so, she had found a strength she never knew she possessed. From the living room, she heard Daniel call her name, followed by the warm laughter of her family. Claire smiled, closed her laptop, and went to join them. Her past might have been built on secrets, but her future was full of light, love, and endless possibilities. And so, dear viewer, as we come to the end of Claire's incredible journey, we invite you to reflect on your own story. What truths are you seeking? What family, biological or chosen, stands by your side? If this tale of courage, identity, and the unbreakable bonds of love has touched you, we ask that you share it with others. Subscribe to our channel to hear more stories that challenge, inspire, and remind us of the power of truth and family. Together, we can create a world where honesty triumphs over secrecy and where every person has the chance to discover their true self. Remember, your story matters, your voice matters, and sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a single question, a single test, a single moment of bravery. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and above all, keep loving.